And obviously, we're going to kick the show off with really what's on every single Clemson football fan's mind, at least, is the big official recruiting weekend that Clemson is about to have. It starts Friday. It goes through Saturday. We'll have some recruits that we'll get into later. Will show up a little bit later in the weekend due to scheduling conflicts and other things like that. But this official visit weekend has been paying huge dividends over the past probably 3 seasons now since Dabo Swinney has decided to add an official visit weekend to Clemson's summer schedule. If you guys remember back not too long ago, Clemson did not do any officials in the summertime. We didn't do any official visits. It was all during fall and spring and that sort of time frame. But Dabo Swinney a couple years ago decided that, he would open up and make it one huge push for a big recruiting weekend for Clemson, and it has paid huge dividends every single year since we have been doing it. And Jordan, we got some huge names coming into town, into Clemson this weekend. So we expect to have some big-time commits coming out of this weekend, hopefully get that ball rolling, much like it did last year and the year before. This is kind of the big push. Now, Clemson's recruiting class has done well so far for the 2025 recruiting class. But, this recruiting weekend in past seasons has, really got some big names to commit to Clemson and really kind of started a snowball effect heading into summer and then into fall and obviously into early signing period, which is December. So I'm going to go ahead and rattle off this lengthy list of individuals that will be visiting Clemson this weekend. Obviously, every single recruit that is already verbally committed for the 2025 cycle will be on campus this weekend. So all 11 of our current verbal recruits for the 2025 cycle will be in Clemson. So we don't need to go through that list, I don't think. But as far as the prospects that will be in town, we got 5-star offensive tackle, obviously probably the biggest target in this class. Left uncommitted is offensive tackle David Sanders out of Charlotte, North Carolina, up in your stomping grounds or near your stomping grounds, Jordan. Obviously the number 1 offensive tackle, number 3 national player. If Clemson could land this guy coming out of this weekend, it would be absolutely massive. It cannot be understated how big that would be. We got 4-star edge Bryce Davis out of Greensboro coming in. 4-star cornerback Grayson Littleton, he's coming in, you said a little bit later. He won't be in there this weekend, but he is still taking an official visit soon to Clemson.
Yeah, June 3rd through the 5th.
June 3rd through the 5th. So beginning of next week, he'll be in Clemson all week and just kind of do it. So obviously Dabo showing a little bit of flexibility there. When he first rolled out this summer recruiting visit, it was hard and fast. You either made it for the weekend or you didn't make it. But he's showing some flexibility there, so that's always good in the recruiting world. 4-star Aquan Fagus, 4-star Jordan Young, 4-star inside offensive lineman Chauncey Gooden. Let's see, 4-star defensive lineman Christian Garrett, 4-star Gregory Xavier Thomas out of Fort Lauderdale. We got 4-star wide receiver Cortez Mills, trying to keep that good streak of wide receiver recruiting that we've been doing lately, Jordan. 4-star inside offensive lineman Mario Nash. 3-star cornerback Devon Starr. 3-star linebacker Kamar Archie. 3-star offensive tackle Mal Waltrip. 3-star inside offensive line Hardy Watts. He is going to be a little bit late. He has a scheduling conflict. So he won't be there on Friday or Saturday, but I believe he's showing up on Sunday and staying for 2 days on campus. So he'll be there through, I think, Monday and Tuesday right there on campus visiting with Clemson and the coaching staff. And then rounded out with the last 3 that are obviously confirmed. Now, this list is subject to change. Names could be added. Names could be falling off. But 3-star inside offensive lineman Max Buchanan, 3-star defensive lineman Walter Mathis, and 3-star offensive tackle Rowan Byrne out of New Rochelle, New Jersey. Okay, so obviously that's a pretty exhaustive list. There's a lot of players there. We're going to kind of go through and highlight a few, but clearly, Jordan, there's a common denominator within that list of big time recruits that are going to be on Clemson's campus this weekend, and obviously there's a push for offensive line. You can clearly see it. Matt Luke is geared up for a huge push this weekend, trying to close the deal on some big time recruits, or at least make some big headway on some of these big time recruits. So obviously, offensive line is going to be a focus this weekend, but it will not be the only focus. What's your thoughts on this big list of recruits that Clemson has coming in? What are the guys that stand out to you the most?
Yeah, I definitely think that this go around, the emphasis in this class was certainly the trenches, as you pointed out. The offensive line, stands out heavily. There's a lot of offensive line prospects that are going to be on campus, but also Clemson is still trying to round out that defensive line class. Christian Garrett is the guy, really, at this point. He's kind of going to put the bow on this defensive line class if they can land him. And the ball is sort of in his court there. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But yeah, the emphasis was the line of scrimmage, obviously, because last cycle, his skill positions, landing the big fish at wide receiver was massive. So that this go around, obviously Clemson is trying to build up and become more of a trenches program. I mean, they have been that way on the defensive side of the ball for many years, but they're trying to get that way on the offensive side as well. And obviously, the offensive line class is headlined by five-star offensive tackle David Sanders. Kind of the big fish everybody's talking about. Been a highly followed recruitment. Clemson at different points in his recruitment has gotten a lot of momentum. But other schools, since he last was on campus, have certainly come in and see some of that. So we'll see kind of what sort of happens. You're battling Ohio State, you're battling Georgia, you're battling Tennessee. It's going to be a tight race, and we're going to see kind of who winds up in the finish line. But obviously, Clemson gets their crack at him this weekend, and we'll kind of see how that goes. And then the other thing I wanted to note is, Clemson is still looking to kind of finalize and land their linebacker prospects. And kind of round that out, Kamar Archie is the number one priority. We'll see kind of how that goes. Clemson, I think, has done a really good job with him, but we will, continue to monitor that and see whether they can get a commitment coming out this weekend, or is it going to be something that happens later in the summer. Going back to the offensive line, wanted to also mention Mal Waldrop. And Hardy Watts. Hardy Watts is a guy that has kind of his recruitment is still kind of taking off a little bit. He's been slower in the process. So I think this is a really good opportunity for Clemson to get a lot of momentum and kind of crack that door open, because he's kind of been, just kind of feeling things out. He hasn't really been in a rush to really, sort out like who his top schools are. So Clemson getting that first crack is really, really nice in landing that first impression. As far as defensive back goes, a priority target at safety is Jordan Young out of Monroe. He's about as close to a Clemson fit as as far as like the between the commits and the prospects that Clemson is still pursuing. I mean, he's about as close to a fit as there is. I mean, other than Gideon Davidson, I think Gideon Davidson was kind of the biggest layup I think I've ever seen in Clemson recruiting. Like that was like knowing his story and his background and his family. It was a match made in heaven. But Jordan Young, he screams, Clemson whenever, from everybody I've talked to around that program. He's kind of gotten a jump as far as his recruiting rankings has gone, and certainly that's gotten a lot of other interest from schools, Tennessee most notably, and of course NC State has been heavy on him as well. But I still feel really good about where Clemson stands, and he wants to commit on his birthday, which is in the month of June. Clemson getting that first official visit and obviously already being high up there, I think that's a really favorable situation for the Tigers.
Right.
As far as other defensive backs, wanted to point out Anquan Fagans is obviously a high. He's a very high caliber prospect, top 100 kid. We'll kind of see how that goes. That recruitment, I don't get the vibe that this is going to go any further after the official visit. We will see. I think that's partially why they reached out and have gone after Zay Thomas, and I think they've kind of given him pause. He's a guy that they've been considering a Florida State lean at different points in his recruitment, but Clemson's offer has certainly given him a lot to think about, and obviously this official visit weekend will definitely give Clemson the opportunity to move the needle a little bit. But all in all, I think this is a really talented defensive line class. I'm sorry, not defensive line class, just offensive line class in general. I think that Clemson getting commitments out of this weekend from really any of them would be great. And you already have Easton Ware committed and Brandon Jacobs, which is already a really strong start. Love both of them, especially Brandon Jacobs as prospects. And so adding, continuing to build on that offensive line class can only help. You're trying to create that paradigm shift at offensive line with Matt Luke, and this is a very important class for him. Wide receiver, I also wanted to point out, Cortez Mills is definitely the priority there. I think you've done a good job, recruiting him, but he's got the call. He's got a lot of people around him, calling him to stay at home and play for Miami, who is the other school that's been heavily involved with him. So we'll kind of see what returns they get out of this official visit weekend. And that being said, on 4-star edge Bryce Davis, that's a recruitment that at different points I thought Clemson had a really good chance to win, but I think Georgia has definitely done the best job and seized some really good control of that recruitment. So I think Clemson has a shot, and we'll kind of see what happens, but not optimistic about my chances, about Clemson's chances there, which is why I think, Christian Garrett is the guy that Clemson is really zeroing in on this weekend, and we'll kind of see, whether they actually land him.
Yeah, man, look, absolutely. What a list of talent coming to Clemson. Obviously, Clemson is not going to land every single one of these guys. There's not enough scholarships to go around. But they have been able to make a lot of headway in years past and close the deal, sometimes surprisingly, with a few guys in past seasons with this big official visit weekend. It helps that you're going to have all 11 of your current verbal commits from the 2025 cycle, especially a guy like Gideon Davison, who's just been out there doing the Lord's work for Clemson's 2025 class, as has Blake Keibert and, a few of the other guys there. They seem to be a really tight class. They seem to be a class that stays in touch and really try to put some pressure on some other guys. David Sanders comes to mind. I've heard, some Clemson reporters and stuff talk about David Sanders and talk about how, he's hired an NIL team and what does that mean for Clemson? Everybody knows Clemson doesn't really lead with NIL when it comes to recruiting. Not that they don't offer anything, not that there's not packages or money out there to be made at Clemson. There's obviously is, but it's not something that Clemson's going to lead with. They're clearly not going to get into bidding wars with anybody. So that'll be interesting, I think, coming out of this weekend, how David Sanders feels about Clemson. I'm sure he'll be on a high. I'm sure he'll say a lot of great things about Clemson. But the fact of the matter is Clemson gets the first of his 4 big official visits of the summer. He's about to go on a string of 4 big official visits, and we got some stiff competition out there for that guy. It'd be great if we could pull him. But, hearing Jason Priester talk about him and things like that. It's not, he doesn't get the warm and fuzzies about him. I don't know. I know he's, grew up really close to Clemson, grew up, kind of a Clemson fan. But at the end of the day, I think him and his family are going to make what they think is the best decision for them. It's not going to be based off of childhood fandom or anything like that. But, I think the trenches are going to be super important this weekend. Obviously, Matt Luke sealing the deal on a few guys would be ideal, shoring up that defensive line like you talked about. And then a few of the other key positions, linebacker and defensive back. Clemson's got a lot of work to do this weekend, but in the past, this has been a huge momentum shift for Clemson. Every single season, almost, you can rest assured that immediately following our official visit weekend, we're going to get a couple recruits, and then it kind of snowballs into several more recruits, and we really gain momentum out of this. So with that said, Jordan, is there any guys that you want? I know, we're not in the business of making predictions. This guy's going to commit this weekend or that guy's going to commit this weekend, but what is your just overall feelings on Clemson's chances of getting a few commits either this weekend or in the short week to follow this weekend? Do you see them gaining momentum and getting a few guys to verbally commit and kind of jumpstart the momentum for this summer and this 2025 class?
Yeah, I think so. It's just kind of hard, with how Clemson, kind of structures their official visit weekend. I mean, they are very strategic with how they kind of do it. And bringing certain guys on campus and especially guys of the similar positions and obviously spots are limited. There's definitely a lot of ways that Clemson kind of goes about it. Just kind of not necessarily pressuring the kids to make a decision they don't want to, but just making it known that, hey, it's like I can't guarantee a spot will be here.
Right.
And so, I definitely think that Clemson is going to come out of this with at least a couple in the following week. I feel really good about a couple. I'm not in the business of making predictions, so I'm not going to say. I think I kind of made it clear when I was talking about some of these prospects who I felt, was kind of on commit watch, if you want to say it. But I don't want to, make any sort of like crystal ball prediction because that's not what I am. I'm not a recruiting analyst. I'm just a guy that follows recruiting and I'm lucky enough to know people, at some of these schools from some of these prospects, but I'm not an insider. I don't know these kids personally. So I am not in the business of making those kind of predictions, but I do think that, Clemson has a really good shot at coming out with a couple. If I had to set the over under for, this weekend or the following week, I'd say 2.5.
Right.
Yeah, I think 3 is very, very, very possible. Who knows? Maybe even more because that's kind of the thing about this official visit weekend is some guys that you weren't really sure. It's like, oh, is he going to? I don't really think he's going to carry his recruitment. I don't think he's going to stop his recruitment. Immediately after this weekend. I think he's going to carry it into the deeper into the summer, maybe potentially into the fall. In some cases, there have been guys like that, and then all of a sudden, they've released a commitment edit, and they're Tigers. So it's like, that's kind of always one of the fun parts about this weekend is like you just don't know because sometimes all it takes is just one really good experience for these guys for you to really swing momentum in these recruitments and that's kind of what the cool thing about what Clemson does and how they've gone about structuring this official visit weekend. So really excited about this, about the group that's coming in, and this is a very important class for a lot of reasons. The Tigers definitely want to knock it out of the park here.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, like it seems like every single year since we've been doing this big official visit weekend in the summer, the May, June timeframe, it seems like every year there's a guy that we didn't really expect, or, we were like, no, I don't think he's going to, shut it down. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, he committed. And then boom, you got another. And it's just the snowball effect. And, just looking back to last season, right? Like those dudes that immediately committed after the big official recruiting weekend, we held on to every single one of those dudes. Not a single one of those dudes decommitted. They went on to sign with Clemson and, show up for spring practice and all that sort of stuff. So Clemson tends to, hold on to recruits once they make that verbal commitment. Not that anything's ever 100%. Nothing ever is in college football nowadays. Anything can flip on a dime. Anything can change at any moment or any day, especially in the world of NIL, in the world of the transfer portal, and the world of tampering that we live in college football. Nothing is off the table. But when Clemson gets those verbal commits, they tend to stick. So I look for at least a couple commitments immediately following this weekend, and then, like I said, hopefully that translates into some momentum. And it's good that you get all these guys on campus together, right? Especially with your 11 guys that you already have committed in the class.
Definitely.
Because what they're going to do when they're there. They're going to be pressuring those dudes like, hey, come on, go ahead and commit. Like, why are you going to go look at that school? You might as well just go ahead and commit to Clemson.
You love it here. Yeah.
Yeah, you love it here. We want to play together. Let's go ahead and lock it in, So it helps having those guys there as an extension almost of your recruiting pitch, and your coaches that are there, and your support staff, and all the guys that are showing the best of Clemson. You got your players that are committed in the 2025 class, and then you got some players that are currently on the roster. You got former players that come back that are, maybe in the NFL now to talk about Clemson and their experience and their development there. So it's a big weekend. There's a lot that goes into it. And I can't wait to see the type of commitments that Clemson will be landing, because I'm sure there'll be quite a few that commit either during this weekend. Sometimes it happens before the weekend's over. And then other times it happens as the week goes, that first week immediately following the recruiting visit. So it's going to be exciting news. I think we'll have hopefully some really good news to talk about in next Thursday's show, Jordan. Hopefully there's some exciting recruiting updates that we can give to the people, and maybe even some more recruitments that we could speculate about on next week's show. But we'll go ahead and leave the big official recruiting weekend there. More to follow, obviously, next week. And we can't wait to see who we land this weekend, who locks down their recruitment and verbally commits to the Tigers. And then we'll see how that translates to the rest of the season. But